In the last lecture module, we looked at Quine's rejection of traditional epistemology and his response to the skeptic. Now we want to turn our attention to his positive view and see how he defends it against the concern that it might be circular. So, if the externalist validation of science proves hopeless, Quine says, as there's no hope of a strong conceptual reduction which renders our theoretical language innocent, that is, strictly reducible to the observation language, then there really is no purpose to the foundationalist project. However, there remains the major focus of epistemology, the relationship between theory and evidence. And so Quine tells us that for me, epistemology is a branch of engineering. It is the technology of truth-seeking, or in a more cautiously epistemological term, prediction. Epistemology then develops and evaluates techniques and tools for rational inquiry against the backdrop of minimal ontological commitment on Quine's view. So what does he mean when he says, but why all this creative reconstruction? Why all this make-believe? The stimulation of their sensory receptors is all the evidence anybody has had to go on ultimately in arriving at their picture of the world. Why not just see how this construction really proceeds? Why not settle for psychology? Now, many people interpret this as Quine opting for description rather than a normative enterprise, but I disagree. I claim that rather than suggesting that we settle for description, Quine is suggesting that we look at the insights of psychology, anthropology, biology, and any other science in the way that an engineer studies a blueprint to understand how the system works, where it is strong, where it is weak, how it can be improved, to refine our understanding of the conditions in which it's doing its work. Such a project, he thinks, will allow us to understand the relation of theory to evidence and what ways theory transcends evidence. And this epistemology, he thinks, with its newly clarified status, does not contain natural science. That is, it does not lay its foundations in a matter external to it. Rather, there is a mutual containment of epistemology in science and of science in epistemology. Now, we might worry that this is a massive circularity, but Quine is careful in how he approaches this position. Science helps us to understand how we might generate a veridical science. So science contains epistemology, but epistemology also contains science in that the veridicality of science is thereby explained through epistemology. But such a mutual containment, unlike an externalist to science justification, makes the epistemic justification of science relative to the specific ontological context, to the world as described by science. Now, this is a less beautiful outcome than the original project, but it's rendered necessary once we understand that there is no stepping out of an ontology to ask epistemic questions. What I think Quine is trying to say here is that all inquiry requires ontological commitment. For instance, in order to do epistemology, we have to have some conception of the mind, some conception of the world, and some conception of the way in which they interact. Once we realize that certainty does not provide us with an independent, epistemically unassailable, ontologically neutral platform from which we can make and defend those initial choices, then we realize that all of our choices must be thought of as contingent, choices that are made in the moment, the best choices available given our options, and we must always be open to the revision of those choices and always considering how best to proceed in our investigations of the world. In doing this, we always remain vigilant, always recognizing the provisional nature of our current worldview and continuously guarding against our slipping into an unreflective dogmatism against which the skeptic so correctly cautions.